waiting on today's guest, and I'm telling you, I couldn't believe my luck when he agreed to speak to us today. So, yeah, I'm so excited. And now I see SANGOMA has entered the waiting room.
Hello.
Hi there.
There we go. Okay.
Hey, how are you,
How
Riffi?
are you? I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I am extremely
Great.
excited and extremely honored to be speaking to you. Other than asking you for reduced rates for mastering and oh my
Pleasure so
goodness.
much. It's good to see you.
Yeah, no, it's good to see you too. Um,
Mm,
so thank you for spending some time just chatting with me. I like speaking to
sure.
people, and I'm making a meal of it now because I have an opportunity to share those conversations.
Sure.
So I wanted to start right at the beginning, no?
Sure.
So there's Riffi, there's Wacho, there's Clifford, there's Machingaifa, Machingaifa. What
That's it.
what is it? Who is who in the zoo?
Okay. Okay. So, wow. Let me start from the very beginning. So, my actual name is Clifford.
Okay.
That's the one that's on my government issued ID.
Okay.
And my family name is Machingaifa. However, when I was young, maybe around 2 or 3 years old, I don't
Mhm.
remember, but my grandmother, I was told, couldn't pronounce my name. So at home they call me Cliff, or they used to call me Cliff, but she couldn't pronounce it because in the Shona language we don't have the letter L. So she used
Ah.
to call me Cliff.
Okay.
Yeah. So she'd call me and say, Griffy, Griffy. And it morphed from Griffy into Riffi. And then at
Oh
home, they
my
used to just call me Riffi. So when I came over to South Africa, because the people called Refil were here, I suppose it was a familiar name as well. And then that kind of just stuck.
God. Mm.
And I was like, okay, no problem. And the whole Watcher thing was a prank. Not a prank, but it was like a joke on Facebook. Wacho in my language means the one. So
Mm-hmm.
like every week, I change my Facebook name into something, back when I was still young, just for fun. So this week could be Riffi the Magnificent or Riffi this or Riffi that.
Okay.
And then on a particular week, I changed it to Riffi Wacho, which basically means Riffi the one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then when I tried to change it to something else, Facebook was like, you've changed it too many times now.
We've had
That's
enough.
Yeah. So they didn't allow me to change it back, and it just stuck.
I think it's so cool. I think names for me like are a particular issue.
Yeah.
Because my name, the way I was taught to spell it, is not the way it's written in my ID. So
Oh.
yeah, so I've had like interesting situations with banks and salaries and stuff, and yeah,
Oh
yeah.
goodness.
So
Yeah.
but that's a whole other story, and we're not here to talk about my name. We are here. We are here
Sure.
because Riffi Wacho.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw before you put your video on, I saw
Mm-hmm.
Sangoma dot or Sangoma full
Yeah.
stop. So talk
Mm-hmm.
to me about that. I know there's something about sound Sangoma, something somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's also another name which, or a brand which I sort of started. So in over the last couple of years, I've been fighting with my identity as an African, and trying
Mm-hmm.
to extract as much as I can out of the African in me. And in reading and studying about all things African, really, I realized that sangomas today are not really what they were back in the day. So when someone says sangoma now, people immediately think like witch doctor or casting a spell or something like
Yeah.
that. And yet, sangomas were traditional healers back in the day, or even still now, but people who generally would heal. So they would use herbs, they would use what we now refer to as naturopathy. I hope that's the word.
Sounds like
diet, exercise, natural ways in which to heal people. So if you were sick, you'd go to a sangoma. They would tell you to go to this particular tree, dig up the root, boil it, drink the water, that kind of thing.
mm.
So we were on tour with Just Six, I think maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. And after the one show, um, normally what happens after a show, if I'm doing sound, is that when they're done, everyone kind of goes and mobs them. They want pictures with them and all of that stuff. But on that particular day, there was like a bunch of people who came to the back where the sound desk was. And, they were asking me questions and they wanted pictures with me because they were like, no, the sound was amazing. There was all sorts of things that was happening. And then Squara, one of the guys from Just Six, came to the back and he was like, no, Riffi was throwing his bones today. So I was like, hmm. So I liked the whole idea of throwing bones and Sangoma thing, but in then taking the word Sangoma, so in my language, which is Shona, Ngoma is the word for drum.
Mhm.
Um, and I think in Swahili as well. In isiZulu, ingoma is a song. Um, and what other language? There's another language in which the word means something musical, but the word ngoma. So I thought, hey, maybe for me, I can heal people through sound.
Wow.
Um, but the sangoma part of it meant healer, but also the ngoma part of it meant music. So
Mm.
it just kind of flowed well that sound sangoma means someone who heals people through sound.
Wow. Wow. You've got
Yeah,
this
it's
like
a bit of a
all
lengthy
figured out.
explanation, but yeah, it means something. It wasn't just a thing of, oh, I just want to call myself sangoma.
I had no
Um,
doubt that it meant something. Yeah.
yeah.
You strike me as, and I mean, I don't know you even personally. I mean,
Mhm.
our interaction over the years has literally been about me like asking you for reduced rates. I'm gonna say that every time because I feel so guilty. But and you've been very accommodating, even though I know you're very sought after. Um, but I wanted to. You mentioned Just Six. But before
Mhm.
we get to that, how did you end up in sound engineering?
Um, Not really by mistake. So in high school, we used to have a band at school.
Hmm.
And on the one day, the guy who does the sound was unavailable. So they were performing somewhere and they were like, please just come, just like push the faders and whatever. That's when I think it sort of then kicked in because I was just there, moving the volume. I didn't know anything else, but the gig managed to go on. Um, and then my mom told me a story of how when I was 3, I'd always cry whenever she goes to work and I'm staying behind at
Hmm.
home in the morning. And she says she found a trick that whenever she was about to leave, she'd put on those big hi-fi stereos that we used to have made out
Oh,
of wood,
yes.
and it covers like half the wall. So we had one of those, and she'd put on an Oliver Mtukudzi vinyl on the turntable and play it. And my mom was like, so I would literally just go and stand by that thing and I'm just twisting buttons and stuff because it had like a bass knob, a treble knob, the volume knob. And she would like sneak out and go to work and I wouldn't even notice her. I'll just be there, So actually, I think that was my first encounter with just being interested in sound, but it kicked off in high school. Um, and unfortunately, at the time that I left high school in Zimbabwe, there wasn't a lot to do. Music was sort of the only thing that I
Mm.
could fall back on. So I started just frequenting the studios around, just sitting in,
Hmm.
watching people. And then eventually, when I came here, I did something similar at Jazzwork Studios here in Randburg, in Joburg. Spent a lot of time there just watching, just learning, and then bit by bit getting sucked into the work that was being done there.
Mm.
So, yeah, I mean, for me, sound from as far back as 3 years old, but I think it was late high school when it actually just kicked in by mistake because someone wasn't there on that day, and I just happened not to be doing anything.
Wow. That just it strikes me that so many people, well, I've been reading of late of so many people who something happened in their high school years, you know,
Right?
uh, that
Yeah.
put them in a path, on a path. I mean, it might have taken them a few years to get to it, but it started in. I mean, India Reid, her parents got divorced when she was in high school, and that sort of was a turning point for her because then she turned to music and songwriting. You know, so just off the back of that, I mean, what do you think we should be doing in high school to encourage people to find a path, possibly?
Yeah, I think perhaps there should be a wider spectrum of arts or the arts sort of related subjects. Because at the moment, yeah, you get music, but
Mm,
the curriculum in music is for a person who either wants to sing or play, not
mm,
necessarily someone
true.
who wants to do sound. You only begin, I think, at tertiary level to get an insight into that.
Mm,
So if possible, I mean, in high school, even if it's an extracurricular activity, it would be interesting to begin to introduce other aspects of the arts that aren't painting or playing an instrument or whatever that is currently taught in schools. Because I mean, music is so it's so wide. There's so
mm.
many places or roles that you can find yourself in there, and it'd be interesting for people to do that. And to your point, I actually don't know anyone who, up until either they're finished with high school or in high school, that had a formal development of sound engineering prior to that. It's currently non-existent, really.
Precisely. And I mean, we need good sound engineers, you know. We I mean, just music on its own. As a singer, I have horrific stories, yeah, of sound actually tanking an entire performance. But I also have equally amazing stories of when you don't even realize that there's sound. My mom always says
Yeah,
that's when it's good sound, when you don't even
yeah.
realize that it's there, you know. And yeah, so I do think that that's something we should speak louder about, you know, and get
For
the
sure.
development going earlier. And in church, you know, generally we just look for somebody to play around with the things there at church, you know, and we just give our second, third, fourth best for Jesus, and we expect that they must develop themselves. They must get better, and we upset with them when it's not done properly. But you know, we have to put in some work. You know, um,
Sure.
I was also, when was this? When did you release your EP?
The Christmas one?
No, your very first EP.
Oh, that was 2014, September 2014.
Yeah.
Full
Is that the
circle,
one
yeah.
that has Inadequate Me on?
Yes, that's the one.
I
That's the
was
one.
so shocked when I listened to that EP. I was over the freaking moon. I think it was the depth, the kind of depth of message that you chose. I mean, Inadequate Me is an amazing song. It's a deep, deep, deep song, you know. But I hadn't up until that point, I hadn't known that you were a singer. So now there's this battle in me because you're on both sides of the microphone. What's that like?
Weird because I actually prefer engineering. The whole singing thing, it happened again by mistake. Someone was supposed to come for a session, and one of their backing vocalists didn't show up, and they had traveled all the way from a very far place, so they couldn't go back and come back. So I was just like, okay, you know what, it's fine. Let me show you how to just press record. I'll go in there and I'll sing with the guys. So just quickly learned the songs and went in and sang. And after the session, they were just like,
Yeah.
that's where the whole singing thing started. So that guy pushed me, dude, you need to record. You need to record. I'm like, yeah, yeah. And I'd been writing songs the whole while.
Mm,
Like songs like Inadequate Me were written probably 2004,
mm,
long time ago.
mm.
And then I was like, okay. So the very first song I recorded was Beautiful Place with a guy called Nda. He used to sing with Sweet Symphony. That was the very first song I ever recorded. And then kept it for a while, and then we put it out way back in the day. But to be honest with you, I prefer the reason why I can go for a very long time without recording anything myself is I really just prefer the engineering side of things. That's what I think gives me more fulfillment. And I sing as and when I have a chance, or when my wife forces me to do
Aha.
it.
Thank
Yeah,
heavens for her. Because we don't want to be robbed here. So
sure.
just for those who are interested in sound engineering as a prospect, um, you're a sound engineer, so you do live sound. You're also a recording engineer, so you record people, and you're
Yes,
also a mix engineer, so you mix
yes.
recorded material, and you're also a mastering engineer. Is it normal for all those things to be in one
Somewhat.
person?
Yes and no. So I think it's just a matter of the economies in which we are currently existing in. Because, like you're saying, those used to all be different people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but especially with mastering, I don't necessarily call myself a mastering engineer, although I can master. Because for me, that's the one thing I think I haven't quite put my heart into perfecting,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
But being a good mix engineer, you learn to become a good recording engineer because um, there are certain things, like say a drum kit sounds different depending on how you mic it, how close your mics are to the skin, at what angle they're pointed at, how far away the overheads are from the kick, all of that stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
to get a good recording so that you can mix well, sometimes you have to know how to record well, which mics to use, how far away does she stand when she's singing, how far I mean, at what angle do you put people if they're singing together so you get minimal bleed, all of that stuff. So you become a good recording engineer so that your mixes can be good as a result of that. And then mixing in studio can sort of cross over into mixing live because most of the people I mix live for, I record.
Ah.
Which is why with Just Six, I'm almost exclusively mixing Just Six now because I do a lot of work in studio with them. So the crossover is very easy because I know all of their songs, I know all of the little nuances, and thanks to technology, we can actually carry their studio sessions into a live environment and sing
Woo!
through,
Mm.
yeah, and sing through that. So um, it's just a thing of if the economy would support it, like in other countries, there are people who are just recording engineers, and they but it will be expensive for you to come into studio and have to pay for a recording engineer, a mix engineer, a mastering engineer. Now, because of economy, you just kind of want to have the one-stop shop where this guy
Yeah.
does everything. So
Yeah.
I do all of that stuff, but where budget allows, on a project by project basis, I'll send stuff over to a mastering engineer so that they
Mm.
can do it.
So, how do you feel about having another set of ears listen to your work? Because essentially, that's what a mastering engineer would do first before
Yeah.
they even start the process. They would, look at the mix and I mean, listen to the mix.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Oh, I'm as it is. Even if I'm not sending something over to someone else for mastering, I always reference of other people.
Awesome.
Always.
Ooh.
Just got in a whole bunch of people and listen, and they make notes and give us their first impression. So I always do that. It's really, really important.
That is a lesson for everyone who wants to record, whether you the recording artist or the mix engineer, or the recording. It's really good to get other people's opinion about your work. It's just I have a particular journey with that because initially I would be saying I've always been sharing my stuff. I'd let people listen and say, does this work? Whatever. But I was doing it from a different place. I was looking for validation, you know. Now I've learned, because this is what I do for other people. I will listen and I will give notes so that, it makes the thing better, So our relationships with how we share music and how we share ideas are also evolving. I'm beginning to understand, So I wanted to also add into that. You have all the different types of engineers, and now enter the producer. What's been your experience like working with producers?
Um, Great. I mean, for me, the job or my job as a mix engineer is just to translate what the artist and the producer want to put out there. So I'm adding color to the painting. They've just drawn an outline. I have to now paint inside the lines and make sure that the painting comes to life. So by and large, producers are easy to work with if you have a good relationship with them. So I always try and build a good rapport from the onset, because when you are getting along with them, communication is better,
Mm,
and that helps me. So I'm literally just taking your idea and trying to interpret what you wanted it to come out as,
mm,
and making it sound that way. So I need to then be able to freely communicate with you. You tell me in no unspecific terms what exactly it is that you want it to sound like. And it makes for some interesting conversation sometimes, because sometimes you get a brief like, I want this person to sound like Beyonce, and that person did not sing like Beyonce. So it's like,
mm,
but it does help to have good rapport with my experience with most of the producers that I've worked with has been very eye-opening. I,
mm,
I learn a lot from the people that I work with.
mm,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, I'm just realizing as you're talking that there is such a lot more to be learned. And the way
Oh
we
yeah.
learn is by hearing from other people, talking to people and hearing other people's experiences, the good and the bad,
Yeah.
But then on the other side, there's also got to be a willingness to share
Sure.
experiences, and that's something that I feel is still developing. I don't think we're quite comfortable sharing yet, but we'll get there. We'll get there one day.
Yeah. You know, in my experience, part of me used to be scared to share to share knowledge, because I was kind of scared that I would be empowering people who would then end up being my competition.
Thank you for saying
So
that.
I was very economical with what I chose to share to people, because I was like, yo, if I tell you my secret, it would be like giving away the secret Nando's sauce recipe or something.
Mm,
But I realized that there's no way to replicate how I interpret music. I can tell you what to do. I can tell you what tools I use, which I have no problem doing. But it's very unlikely that you'd be able to use them in the way that I would use them, the same way I wouldn't be able to do what you do. And now I'm a solid subscriber to the theory that a candle loses nothing by lighting another. If I
absolutely.
can in some way impart information that will help you on your journey, and maybe even bring about a different level of change than I could have done, then
Mm,
there's nothing wrong in me doing that.
mm,
At the end of the day, in my lane, aim to be the best at what I do, and that shouldn't then influence whether or not I share music or ideas or knowledge with other people. I just focus on doing what I do and doing it well, and not have to worry about what other people are doing.
wow. Wow.
Mm.
So many lessons in that. So many. Um, you mentioned
Correct.
earlier that you are just about exclusively mixing for Just Six. I was going to ask you about that because I remember, I think it was a couple of years ago, I missed a concert that Just Six did in Cape Town that I dearly wanted to attend. Um, and I didn't know this at the time, but friends of mine actually ended up going to this concert, and they really really enjoyed it. So talk to me about Just Six and the relationship with Just Six.
Cool. So we've known each other for maybe 11 years now, I think,
Really?
with the Just Six guys. I think 2009 was when we first recorded their first song. I could be wrong, but I think it's 2009 or 2010. So it was a thing of, I don't know where I heard them. I heard them somewhere. And at the time, I had a studio in Fontainebleau. So I sent Nkosi a message, and I said, hey, listen, if you guys want, I've got a studio, come through, let's just record and see how it sounds.
Mm,
We recorded their first song. I think it was Let Not Your Heart Be Troubled. But I've never heard it anywhere, really, because I've even lost the files. But from then on, we developed a good relationship, and then found out that I'm actually related to Nkosi and Nta. They're related to someone who I'm related to, so we're like,
okay.
family. And then when they started preparing their first album, Kuzolunga, I was like, well, I'll record you guys. At that time, I was sort of now beginning to get comfortable in that a cappella space.
Mm,
So
mm,
they came through. We recorded that album. It was more successful than we thought it would be. And from then on, I think it was just a thing of I really understood how to interpret their sound,
mm,
to the point where eventually, when technology would allow, we could take their studio sessions and then use those live. So they were like, hey, listen, why don't you just do our sound live? At which at the time I wasn't so keen, to be honest. I didn't see myself doing the whole touring thing. Like I hate traveling. I do
mm,
not like traveling at all. Um, but did sound for them for a little while. Then 2016, I took a step back and just needed to focus on the studio work that I was doing.
mm.
And then 2017, we got back together, and then we did a couple of tours, 2017, 2018 as well, both locally and abroad. So
Yeah.
the reason why I say I almost mix exclusively for Just Six is I'm now a believer of the sound engineer is just as much a part of the performance as the people on stage. So you can't perform with a band if you don't know their songs, if you don't know any of the
Oh,
nuances, if you
yeah.
don't know what's happening, right? It's not just a thing of I'm listening and trying to balance things. I must know that when this guy is doing this lead, I'm putting this effect for this long at this
Mhm,
point, all of that stuff. So
mhm.
it works well, and we're also all just really good friends. So it works really well, and I enjoy it, which is why I think I'm okay with doing live sound for them, and probably will for the foreseeable future. If someone else were to come and say they want me to do live sound, yeah, I'd have to like think about it on a case by case basis.
Oh
But
my goodness.
yeah,
No,
it just
that
depends
that
on
makes
how
total
well I know your
yeah,
music. Yeah,
that
yeah.
makes total sense. And I'm grateful to you for saying that because I mean, I have benefited from quite an early age. When I was 15, I sang in a group in Cape Town called Spirit of Life, and we had a dedicated sound engineer, and that's when I learned the sound engineer even knows your voice. Knows which parts of your voice you are uncertain of, or maybe a bit scared of, and it's a relationship that is so crucial to a successful and meaningful performance.
Sure.
um, and I also hope that when I say that I work with this person as a sound engineer, it's no shade on anyone else. It's just that the relationship is there, the understanding is there.
Yeah, yeah.
So wow. It's really great to hear that from someone such as yourself. um,
Okay.
you're married to a
Yes.
beautiful, beautiful doll. I keep calling her a doll. I wanted to hear from you, like, how do you maintain a work-life balance? Because my stereotype of a recording engineer is someone who will work till the wee hours of the morning, will get lost in a mix, and how do you maintain a work-life balance?
I won't lie, it can be tough.
Mm.
And it requires a level of understanding from her. I think what makes it easier for me is she's also very interested in what I do.
Ah.
Um,
Mm,
so a lot of the times, if I'm going to studio, she will come along,
mm,
and she'll just be a fly on the wall, or she'll learn, or like now more, she's beginning to find stuff to do in studio as well, because she's learning how to do all of that. So I'll give her something to do and say, okay, I need to take a 5 minute break. Can you just continue recording this person or whatever?
mm,
Something that's not too difficult to do.
mm,
The one thing that I think she struggled with in the past a lot was just traveling, because I could go away. I think the longest we've been apart was 3.5 weeks.
oh,
I
that
think when
is
we
long.
were in Russia. Yeah.
Mm,
So it's a bit difficult, but hopefully, what I think would be a good thing to do is just to bring her along if I can for those kind of trips.
mm,
If I'm going to studio, if she wants to, she can come along. Um, but we've sort of managed to make it work, man. I think it's just the grace of God. One thing that I do want to say is I totally get the whole thing of working 14, 16 hours a day. And there was a point in time where I did that a lot. But the most important thing I think any engineer, especially one who's planning to start a family, should be focusing on is not so much the quantity of the work that you do, but the quality of it in terms of, am I going to work on 10 projects that are going to pay me 10 Rand? Or am I going to work on 3 projects that are paying me 4 Rand each? If you get what I mean.
Totally.
So if you're able to get to a point where you're working and are getting enough money for you to have time for your family, that would be the most ideal. That's what I'm working towards. There's a mate of mine called Ken Lewis who literally can afford to just mix a single song every month and spend the rest of the month traveling because he charges like 20 to 25,000 US dollars per song. Yeah. But then, like, he's mixing for people like Kanye West and those guys. So the
Oh, you
pedigree,
know
I
people
suppose, of the
though?
people. Well, yeah, the people that he's mixing for allow for that to happen. So he can get paid 20 grand and his expenses for the month are taken care of and travel for the rest of the month because he's single or, you know.
Mm,
But that's what I'm sort of aiming for, which is why I suppose over the years you've seen me working with a lot of like reputable names.
mm,
It was a very deliberate choice to aim for that standard of work so that I can afford to do one album and that one album can cover me for the next 4 months
mm,
if
mm,
yeah.
mm. Wow, that's so sensible. So it's not just about like spending all these hours and becoming this almost like a hermit when you're mixing, an album. There is a bit of that I do get, but
Mm,
you want to live too, you want to
you
have a
do.
life to talk about,
Yeah.
and I believe like someone who can write a song like Inadequate Me must have a very deep sense of life, and a very, very clear understanding of how difficult life can be,
Yeah.
um, I was really, really, really moved by that song. But what's the next big thing for Riffi?
Wow. Okay. So at the moment, we are working on another EP, my wife and I. So last year we did Christmas with the Wachos. This December we're going to be putting out Hymns with the Wachos, which is
Ah.
a selection of our favorite hymns.
Mm-hmm.
We've been working on that since July, actually,
Mm-hmm.
um, and we're getting close to the end of that. So that's the next thing that I'm looking towards personally. Putting out music in December. Hopefully, it'll be a good body of work. And then next year, God willing, if borders are open, we're going to do a lot of traveling as well with Just Six and a couple of other interesting projects that have been set up in the last couple of years.
Mm.
Most of which, unfortunately, I'm not allowed to talk about. But um, there's a
We'll
few
take your word for
interesting,
it.
yeah, there's a few interesting projects. Some of which started in the years uh, prior. Some of the people you see me in studio within the last couple of years, some good stuff is coming your way in 2021. So
Oh, awesome.
yeah, it's looking like a good year if nothing happens. We don't want to jinx it, but hopefully we're not going to have another pandemic or something like that.
Wow. I mean, this is it's you're living many people's dream. You're living many people's half dream. Some people are like halfway there, but
Mm,
being involved in their passion is a hobby more than it is, what they do every day.
mhm.
But you make it sound like it can be done,
Yeah.
sound fun.
Yeah.
I think that there are people who will be inspired by your work. Besides the ones who already know you and are inspired by you, like me, there are people who will now have a new belief, that you can be a full-time sound engineer,
Yeah.
live a happy life, have a relationship with the Lord, have a wife, and
Yeah.
make it work.
Yeah.
So thank you for being
It's
awesome.
pretty good. That I love that you're doing this. It's I think it's great for us to be able to share insights,
Mm.
especially as musicians. What with everything that's been happening, we've all been kind of holed up in our own little spaces.
You know.
So it's great to
Um,
share insights, and I'm honored to have been a guest here.
oh, thank you.